the two topics that we have left is sprint planning and the sprint review. So the sprint review, like I will kickstart the discussion of sprint review. Oh, here, let me move the topics in order. You know, I really like we have like a lean coffee type of approach to our things, except we don't vote on things. I just randomly pick them off the board. So the sprint review is normally. Is it like 0.75 hours per? I can't remember what the Scrum Guide dictates, but basically the sprint review, I think it's 0.75 hours. Yeah. Dictates like for a 2-week sprint, you should have like an hour and a half sprint review per team. But like the concept of design thinking is you have a lot of fast demos, like every other day maybe. I mean the cadence is arguable or debatable or whatever. But like, does the concept of design thinking kind of like coincide with the sprint review and kind of maybe not clash, but it's sort of the same thing? Is you should be demoing your product every couple days, or maybe like let's say that in the normal cadence of your sprint, you can get an item accomplished and done, and like on to the next environment or whatever, like every single day. That seems to indicate that like you should probably be demoing that every single day. Like if you can get one item done in your sprint every day, you probably should be demoing that item at the start of the very next day. And that's like the concept of design thinking seems to fit into like you can break up your sprint review. So rather than save all that stuff into one day at the end of a 2-week period, do it every day, or maybe every other day, or maybe every 3 days at the absolute most. That's my thinking for breaking up a sprint review, or challenging the concept of waiting to the end to demo all your stuff to the stakeholders.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think waiting till the end doesn't really give you obviously any time to react to any feedback. It's just simply taking it in the next sprint, right? So if you did do demos more frequently, it gives you the opportunity to react and get that fast feedback. Now, as far as the do it every day, do it every other day, etc. Just like all of the events, I think it depends. So not all teams can deliver everything every day or every 2 days, right? But I think one thing is for sure, and that is, as soon as something is done by the team, right, it should be promoted to a higher environment where it's available to the users to look at. These are your BAT users; they can look at it. Now, is that the same as a demo? Arguably, because the stakeholders who are giving you that approval, or even like tacit approval of yes, you're on the right track, or yes, we accept that, they may not be there on the UAT or BAT panel, right? But they take their input from them. So I would say definitely promote everything that is done when it's done to a higher environment, automate the heck out of that, right? And then the other thing to do is reach out to them and say, this was there. Have you had a chance to look at it, right? They may not look at it, and that's their prerogative, really, because they have full-time jobs too. So that's okay. But the team has already given them the option to look at it and provide that early feedback. That does not, though, negate doing a sprint review at the end. I think the sprint review at the end is simply capping it by saying, here are all the things we did cohesively, especially if you've got more than one team contributing to a bigger solution. It's important to do that, because that's the integration that could break things. So at the end of the sprint, you're saying, as 5 teams, let's say, here is the product increment, which is a culmination of input from all of the teams throughout the sprint that we have been able to come up with. Let me show you that. Let us show you that.
But you I understand where you went. Like, you went with scaling because it's a more complex ecosystem that you're a part of. But if you're one team, just in the concept for one team, like the design thinking. So the wheel of design thinking is you conduct your research to understand what your users want, and then you kind of like define the concept of what your users want, figure out what you're going to do. You ideate. I absolutely can't stand ideate, by the way. You ideate.
It's a verb now.
Yeah, or something. What your users want, and then you Strange things happen sometimes in the background of this that nobody gets to see.
I expect the lights to go off
I know.
in a few minutes.
I know. Oh no! I got to pay attention. It's quick. Somebody set a timer for 15 minutes. So you sync up with your users. You define what they need. You ideate the issues. You prototype the issues, which like arguably the sprint is like the ideate, prototype, test, implement, like all rolled into one sort of deal. And at some point, like in like the test phase, you return to your users to get their idea, like to get their feedback or whatever on what you did. Like like to wrap what I think I heard, and you can clarify what I think I heard was. You want to do all that in the small increments, but you can't miss the opportunity to sync up at the end of the sprint to say this is everything that we did. I guess like my challenge to that is like why can't you break the sprint into smaller, like the first story, implement the first story, get user feedback, get their thumbs up, thumbs down that we don't need to change the backlog or whatever. Basically everything you would do in the sprint review, you just do in smaller increments, and then by the time when you get to the sprint review becomes like, I mean, we already did, everything individually.
Yeah. So first of all, you're right. When I said something about multiple teams contributing to a greater solution, it implied scaling there. But I think even in a single team scenario, it doesn't negate the fact that just because you're incrementally showing things throughout the sprint, that action X hasn't broken something that was earlier seen as working functionality, right? And for that reason, you need to be able to say, soup to nuts, in this sprint we have delivered these stories, boom, boom, boom. It needs to be quick because it can be, right? But it's to the stakeholders, it gives the assurance that there is a solution being built rather than bits of functionality.
Right. Yeah.
And the other thing that I mentioned that I go back to is you don't want something to break something that was fixed earlier or built earlier.
Okay.
So, but doing it frequently during the sprint means you don't have to wait. You don't have to spend an hour and a half on a sprint review. You simply say, you saw these in the sprint. I'm going to show you these quickly as an integrated whole, right? So we showed you putting an item in a basket off a website. Now we're going to actually go through the motions of buying a product. I'm going to browse, I'm going to select, and put it into a basket. I'm going to check out the cart. I'm going to pay for it, etc. And it's one transaction as a holistic kind of transaction as a user might. So more like a UX type of journey there rather than individual slices of functionality.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best approach right there.
So do you think a better approach would be to do both inside of the sprint, so to break up and have smaller reads? So I guess let me try to break this down to a pragmatic approach. Like if I were to actually bring this into a team and try this, maybe what I could do is let's say we're doing a 2-week sprint. So my sprint review is supposed to be scheduled for an hour and a half, and I don't know how many features I have in that hour and a half, but let's just say, for example, that I have with an hour and a half would break into 9 features of 10-minute segments each. Let's just say, like a feature does not take 10 minutes to demo, okay? Yeah. But there's discussion stuff. Let's just say for the purposes of this discussion, let's say we have 9 features in the sprint, okay? If I take every time, like at my stand up in the morning, we say we're done with feature X. We're done with feature A. We're moving on to feature B. You know what I mean? Day 2, we're done with feature B. We're moving on to feature C, etc. That kind of works out actually because it's 10 days in the sprint and I have 9 features planned. Oh, look at that. But no, if I say the team is finished with feature A, maybe the product owner can get with the stakeholders for feature A and schedule just a 10-minute sync up.
I'll tell you what, though, 9 features to review at the sprint review isn't really an hour and a half. It's a bit longer probably, because typically sprint reviews get into how the sprint went. So where you share the metrics, any anomalies, stuff like that. Yeah. But I think that time, the hour and a half, really could be only half an hour in the end.
Yeah.
Because the product owner will have done those events, right? Where they should say, here, let me show you what the team's done now. Yeah. Early feedback, where the stakeholders go, it's not quite right, but it's good, right? But it's not quite right.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. I was going to say, well, maybe at the end, at the end of the daily Scrum every day, you could say, okay, we're done with this feature, and the product owner, assuming you're clearing a feature every day or whatever, every other day, could be it. Doesn't matter. Yeah, it really doesn't matter. But assuming things are going to done, that you have some kind of normal cadence of getting to done every day, the product owner could be taking that item that's done, and the product owner doesn't even really need the team to do it.
They should ideally be doing the demo.
They should be able to do the demo themselves. Okay, I don't like. There's a lot of assumptions on my part. I will freely admit. However, they should be able to take the software, get the subject matter expert or the user or whoever it's involved, get them on the line, maybe later that day, maybe at the next day, whatever. They schedule something, and just 10, 15 minutes with the product owner. Hey, the team cleared this. Let me show you what the solution looks like. Get some feedback. Adjust the backlog based on that feedback, if necessary, and call it done. And then at the end for the sprint review, the sprint review could be as easy as hey. The sprint review could be, I've been in sprint reviews where you invite the subject matter experts or the stakeholders or the customers involved, and they come to the sprint review and they observe the features being demoed or whatever. However, the sprint review also could be the product owner at that point saying, I showed this to this customer and they said XYZ, just reviewing with the team, showing them what backlog of items they created because of whatever. And you're right, that you could turn a hour-long demonstration into a 25-minute, hey, I showed this to the customer, they liked X, Y, and Z, they didn't like, whatever. I created this other story, maybe we'll handle it 2 sprints from now. I talked to them, they're all right with it, whatever. And you're basically having a discussion about how you adjusted the backlog based on what came out of the review, which, by the way, is the point of the sprint review, to adjust the backlog based on what is, I feel like, now, after coming off of a stint as purely a product owner, I have a much higher respect for the event of the sprint review, because the whole point of that event, it is my event. Mm-hmm. It is a sprint review. It's for me, the product owner, to say, based on the work that we're producing, I see these things that need to happen or not, or maybe we knocked it out of the park and we never need to revisit this again. But more often than not, what happens is I see these things that need to change in the future based off of what we did today, and then I'm adjusting the future plan based off of what we did today. That's where I find the value out of it,
Yeah, I completely agree that the review is really a product owner event.
You're right.
I also think that at the sprint review, at the end of the sprint, when you have perhaps a greater audience there, like the stakeholders and whatnot, the messaging from the product owner should be, here are the things that have been developed over the sprint, and here is the value of those things. Now, there's feedback based on that collectively over the sprint, not from this meeting, but not from the sprint review necessarily.
Sure, yeah.
And that feedback, to your point, has been incorporated into the backlog. So we're on top of it, we're iterating, right? Yeah. And in the future, you're going to see the results of those, those efforts, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. So the actual demo at sprint review needs to be handled by the product owner. to be the most effective, rather than a developer doing it. A developer could be drafted to do those mini ones throughout the sprint, where the product owner's seeing it for the first time, maybe, right? Doesn't know what buttons to press or whatever it is. But yeah.
Well, I mean, like I had this discussion with my team actually very recently, and it was like the product owner. No, it was. It doesn't matter who. This is like what we were talking about before, where like facilitates versus like owns or whatever. Like the developer can facilitate the demonstration, but like the product owner really needs to be like present and accountable, talking through the review and engaging. Like I think I haven't put much thought into this actually, but I could be wrong. But I think putting the developer and the customer slash stakeholder into direct conflict with each other, like where they're showing something and the developer is like trying to explain why things are working or whatever, like that's probably a bad position to put the developer in. Like the product owner really needs to be in the middle of that.
I agree. I think developers often feel like there's confrontation when they hear feedback.
Yeah.
Or critiquing their work. Some people see it that way. But the product owner should be the one terming it in terms of business value, right? This is the business value we've achieved this sprint. And here is the feedback collectively throughout the sprint that is being incorporated. Here's this other feedback. We put it in the backlog for post MVP. If there's budget, we'll get to it, but it really isn't needed. It's more of a desire. That kind of messaging sits well with stakeholders because they think you're on the right track then and getting value for money. On the line they think you're on the dotted line to a finish, right? Which is all they care about at that point because they're funding the project perhaps.
So like from this so what I'm taking from this discussion so far is there's the normal way of doing the sprint review, which honestly that's the only way I've done it. Was just you get to the end of the sprint and you demo all your features. There's the other way is your product owner kind of like takes each feature as it's done and demos it individually in kind of an ad hoc demo, and they can invite people in to help them demo the feature, but they should be involved. Okay, so to summarize what we've been talking about with the sprint review, there seems to be two main ways that we're talking about, which is the normal way that everyone learns, which is you do your whole sprint, and then at the end of the sprint, you demo all your features to the stakeholders, business, whomever, right? The other way is you break up your individual features as you finish them in the sprint, and your product owner and whoever he or she needs, you delegate. Delegate? That's not the right term. You demo them in sort of micro reviews of individual features. Are there any other ways that we could propose to do the sprint review as opposed to those two?
So I think given the purpose of the sprint review, right, is to demonstrate or illustrate what value you've delivered. Right. You could potentially say, let's do a mid-sprint kind of an affair, right? So at the end of a week, let's say. Or if you're on a 3-week cadence, you could do it twice. At the end of the first week, at the end of the second week.
Or every couple of days.
Or every couple of days. So it depends on the cadence at which the team is getting things done. Some features could take longer than others, so it doesn't even have to be every 2 days. It could be at the end of every feature. Mm-hmm. Some are longer than others. So be fluid, right? Don't be dictated by a given kind of time schedule, but be more frequent than once a sprint, so you can have the opportunity to inspect and adapt, right? To pivot if you needed to, a lot sooner than you would otherwise.
Yeah, that would be it'd be a very interesting thing to try as a Scrum Master. I mean, you really have to know your team's normal cadence. It would be very alluring to me to try to schedule something every 2 or 3 days. Like what we were talking about, like the design thinking thing. Like, well, every 2 or 3 days, I want to be demoing something to the business, because I feel like in that, for me, in the engagement that I am ending now, that my contract is finishing, it would have been very powerful to me to be going to the business every 2 or 3 days and saying, let me show you the feature that we've just finished working on, basically, because the engagement that I just finished, the business, like I transformed that company. Like before I transformed that company's development teams, they were going a very long time without demoing anything. I'm talking months without demoing anything to the business. So for them, I feel that would have been if I would have had this discussion a year ago and I would have come into this new, I probably would have tried that to start. It was like, I want to be demoing something to the business every 2 or 3 days. So I would have put a demo on the business's schedule on, whatever, Tuesday, Thursday. Maybe sometimes I delete them if I didn't need them. But I think as a thing moving forward, I would just put every single Tuesday, Thursday, I would have had a block of time that I potentially could be demoing something, and if I chose not to use that time, I'd just delete the time block. Everyone would get their time back, and everything would be great. That would have been I think that would have been a great way to handle things for me.
Yeah, I'll just say 2 things about that, right? So one is as a Scrum Master, to make sure that at these micro reviews, or whatever you want to call them, the team is only showing completed work, right? Not what's in the hopper, right?
Right, yeah, right.
And then the other thing is to the business. We mentioned that term. Now, to the business means you may not get everybody you need there, right? But you'll get, maybe the BAT team members could be there.
Yeah.
Because this is automatically, implicitly, also knowledge transfer. Yeah. This is how it works.
Yeah.
So what that precludes, or not precludes, what that actually avoids is this. When the item hits their staging environment or wherever they're doing their testing, UAT, BAT, sometimes things come back to the team, right, as, oh, this isn't working. And oftentimes it's, well, you're not using it the right way. You're not using it the way we intended it to be used.
Yeah.
All of that goes away because they've seen you demo it. The product owner has seen you demo it. So all of that goes away. Doesn't completely do away with, KT type of thing, but it puts a big dent in it. So be aware that you won't get all your stakeholders because it's so frequent, but you'll get the right ones at that level. And at the end of the sprint review, if you get the major stakeholders that are implicitly agreeing to move forward with it, etc., right? Those that are funding the project,
yeah, right.
Then I think you can win based on that.
I think this is a great option for breaking up your sprint review and bringing the business in, especially for people whose sprint cadences are longer. Like mine have always been 2 weeks. In almost every project I've been involved in, they've been 2 weeks. I can't remember if I may have been engaged in teams that their cadence was 1 week, but I've not been engaged in teams where their cadence was longer than 2 weeks. I've always tried to steer the teams away from going longer than that. But especially for teams where their cadence is like 3 weeks, or even especially for the people that are 4 weeks, like going up and demoing to the business much earlier than the end of that a month seems such a long cadence to me.
Yeah.
But being able to demo, regardless of your cadence, being able to demo and get that feedback from the users, stakeholders, users, whatever you want to call them, seems such a powerful tool, regardless of your cadence, like divorced from your cadence. Seems like such a powerful tool to employ.
Yeah, I concur with you. I think if you're on a 1 week sprint, you probably don't have to do that as much.
You probably don't, yeah.
But maybe you do. So what you do, if I'm on a 1 week sprint schedule, I don't do that as a matter of course necessarily. But if there's a significant feature that I'd like feedback on, then I might say, okay, let's schedule an ad hoc meeting to say, hey, let's not wait till the end of the week.
Yeah, I think you probably bring up I probably said that to illustrate, like, if you're on a longer release cadence, like forcing yourself. I don't know. It's not really forcing, but like trying to get. If you're on a longer release cadence, I guess the impulse from the business is not to get that feedback, and you kind of have to try to get feedback earlier. Because your release cadence is so long. However, you bring up a good point, which is the opposite of that, which is you're on a weekly cadence from your development team, and I kind of feel that on a weekly cadence, it is probably more important as a product owner to stop what you're doing and go get the customer or stakeholder or whatever to show them the feature. Because like my personal issue with a weekly cadence is like I feel if you develop something like and the customer doesn't like it at the end of that week, like you're like it's super grindy to me because you have to really pivot and the next week you have to reverse what you did. You know what I mean? Like I feel if you're on a weekly cadence and you're only turning out 2-3 stories during the course of your entire sprint, it's kind of on the product owner to really make those features that you're putting out make the customer happy. So you it's probably beholden to, like you should probably be beholden to stop your sprint, not your sprint, like stop what you're doing as a product owner and make absolutely certain of your users' feedback in that instance. To take your users' feedback into account before you get all the way to the end of your sprint, to absolutely know that they like what you're doing. You know what I mean?
I agree completely. I think that should be part of the working agreement between a product owner and his or her stakeholders.
Yeah.
That there will be frequent inspection of the product and feedback solicited, right?
Yeah.
And incorporated into the resulting solution. And not just at the end of every sprint. So, I fully agree with that. I think it's a mature product owner who institutes those kinds of events.
Oh, man. Sprint reviews. Who knew that there was so much to talk about with sprint reviews? Like, I'm going to shuffle that card into our done pile. This lean coffee method of approaching our subjects is actually working very well for. We should adopt this as a normal thing. Look, I thought about that. I thought about like showing our like the planning of these topics, which actually like it takes like 5 minutes, but it's like I probably should just like maybe I can get a top-down camera and like show our planning of these topics. Yeah.
That would be good. I think people should see how we plan this.
I don't think it would take. Like technically speaking, I don't think it would be that difficult.
It shouldn't be
because the microphones would be on live regardless of what camera's on.
We have a stand there in that table lamp we can deploy, right? We can MacGyver the hell out of that.
Yeah. I think we can do it. I can figure that out. Like, it might be interesting as an intro. It might be interesting. Like I can zoom through it too as an intro. Anyway,
sure.
So the last topic that we did not discuss yet is the sprint planning. Now I have to admit, like, I'm putting refinement off to the side for a second because I think that it's not really an event, but I think it would be worthwhile for us to talk about it. But I really cannot so there are 2 ways that I know to do sprint plannings, and I really can't I don't think I can wrap my brain around other ways to do sprint plannings. So maybe you can expand my mind for I'm willing to consider other options. But the only way that I know how to do sprint planning, so the sprint planning is I think the Scrum guide prescribes 2 hours per week of the sprint. So for a 2-week sprint, for example, it will take a half a day. It'll take 4 hours to do your sprint planning. So the way I know to break that up is you take a relatively short amount of time, and your product owner presents like, this is the things I want to do. Like, this is what I want to accomplish. And then the team takes those what items and they break it down into tasks. They figure out how they're going to develop it, how they're going to test it, basically how they're going to implement it top to bottom. And they write those tasks out if they have not done it before, because some teams do it before or whatever. And they write those tasks out top to bottom, and then they commit to say, these are the things we absolutely know we can do in the time given or whatever. And like some teams do it all at once. Product owners what, teams how, commitment or whatever all at once. Some teams break it up into 2 separate sessions. I don't really think I'm not sure if I know another way to do it other than the 2 ways that I've just described.
I think those are the 2 most common ways, and increasingly people are leaning toward breaking it up into 2 separate parts.
Yeah.
The what and the how,
Yeah.
right? So start with the end goal in mind. Why do we bother with sprint planning to begin with, right?
I don't know.
What's the point? I mean, after all, it's half a day of everybody's time, right? So, I think it's like, in a war, you have a strategy from the high, from high on up, right? This is a strategy. But on the ground, in the air, however, at the various local levels, there's tactics. And so these are the battles, right? And so it's similar to what we do every day. The strategy is laid out in terms of a product roadmap, and the product owner says, here are the sequence of events that I would like to see, the most highest value ones at the top, right? That kind of thing. The team says, okay, we're going to take of the highest ones X number into this sprint.
Yeah.
So then why bother going beyond that? You've already got that. You've already got the target to work on. Why sprint planning? Right? So I think there's 2 reasons in my mind. The first reason is for the team to have another look at that sprint planning kind of target list of stories and see if those are the right ones. They're the right ones in terms of the product owner's perspective of hierarchy, prioritization by value, etc. But from a team perspective, they may have technical reasons why that particular hierarchy of stories may not be able to be implemented. Like there's dependencies, right? So they need to fulfill those first. So now let's say you started with 10 things that the product owner decreed as the highest value, and the team picked 6 of those. Well, within sprint planning, the team discusses how to implement those, and maybe let's say they add 3 more because these are architectural in nature and not functional from the business perspective, but they are needed in order to build the solution. In construction, it would be, I need a wall, concrete block wall on the ground floor, first floor, and then I need a wood block, second floor. In reality, it's to actually deliver the concrete wall, you have to dig the footings, pour concrete, then you have to wait for the concrete to cure.
Of course.
And so the team decides all of that. And let's say, so in the grand scheme of our example, there's 9 now. There were 6 from the product owner. The team added 3, and they decide the sequence in which to deliver this. That's all well and good. The product owner needs to know that that is what's happening. Indeed, it may be the case where the team decides, okay, we've added 3. We really can't deliver those 6 that she wanted. We're going to push 1 back. And the team is perfectly at liberty to do that. So they do that. This is the point. It's a collaboration between the product owner and the team about what we're biting off, right? As a team. So that's the first part of the sprint planning. And then once they've done that, the second part kicks in where the team says, okay, now we know what we have to do. How are we going to do that? So let's look at every story and say, do we know enough about each story? All right. If we don't know enough, let's ask the product owner. And that might, in practice, go through like a BA or somebody. But clarification, getting to the nitty-gritty, right? Making sure we know everything we need to know in order to fulfill every story. So that's part and parcel of the how as well. Then the other thing is the sequencing. The team can completely change the order in which they're going to tackle these stories, right? With a bigger goal of doing everything by the end, but for reasons best known to the team, usually dependencies, they're going to tackle things in the order they feel best. And in the how, the third part really is, as a team of 6 people, whatever it is, how are we going to take this workload over the finish line? So we already just decided that we're going to do story number 4 first, and then number 1, and then number 3, right? So let's look at story number 4. How are we going to work on that? And again, the team will decide by themselves, and somebody will say, well, I can start with that. I can start on this piece. Who can help me with it? Somebody else will go, you and I can pair on that. They can swarm, they can pair program, etc., mob program. That's probably the best way. The worst way I've seen it is Scrum Master says, Fred, you're owning this story. You work on this, and Fred, I can only do the front end.
Yeah.
Who can do the back end? Well, what about Mary? You can do the back end. Mary's like, it's going to take me some time. You are introducing mini waterfall within your sprint there, right?
Yeah,
so avoid that. But so that's coming back to the sprint planning. Why it's so long? Because all of this takes time. That's why. You can actually do some things to reduce that time. And it goes back to the event you mentioned, which is, at the sprint, within the sprint, when you're doing these elaborations, right? That's when the team could start thinking through that and say, hey, we really can't do that unless we do this other thing.
Yeah.
And so the product owner knows then, instead of at the sprint planning, that you have to shuffle these things. But again, it assumes a certain level of maturity within the team / product owner, to be able to get to that level of conversation. Maybe to happen in a few weeks, but initially for a new team, it's just enough to get through the sprint planning. The exit criteria for that is we know what we have to do, we know how we have to do what we have to do, and tomorrow morning we can hit the ground running, right? So sprint planning is critical for that reason, I think. I think it's often the case where people shortcut it. And what you'll find these teams do is within the sprint, they'll struggle because they're going to say, I thought we had to do things this way, but now we have to change that. That's because you didn't think it through enough during sprint planning.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about this in a previous episode. We talked about getting through sprint planning, but not really truly getting through sprint planning because you still have things you need to plan as the sprint goes along. Which is a huge problem, especially for the product owner. Like the only things that the things that I want to talk more about is the when the team basically changes. So when the team changes the priority of things. So as the product owner, I'm setting the priority. I need things delivered in the order, and the team is coming along and saying, well, we have to work on item number 4 before we work on item number 1, and I'm like, well. As a product owner, I'm like, I need item number 1 done first because it's the most important. So why are we working on an item that happens all the time? By the way, it's not a real. I'm not saying this is not a realistic thing. I understand it happens all the time, especially the most common thing that happens to me is. One specific developer, they want one specific developer to work on item number 1 because they're the best equipped, or they know that code or whatever, and the developers will say, this is the best person to work on this. He's tied up or whatever, or maybe he's not available for 2 days, or maybe he's out the first day of the sprint, whatever it is. So it's they will not work on item number 1 on the first day of the sprint. They'll start with item number 3 or whatever. Which kind of drives me crazy as a product owner because I'm like, I need item number 1. That's the number 1 item, Yeah, so that's a very good point you raised there. This does happen frequently, but we're talking about sprints here, right? Oh, yeah.
So the product owner says, I need these things done, right?
Yeah.
From my product backlog by the end of this sprint, sprint that we're entering now. Let's say it's a 2-week sprint. The product owner is not saying, I need the first item done by Tuesday of this sprint. Right. Now, what you say is valid if you're not...
Nor would I say.
Right. But what you're saying is valid if you're not doing sprints, or if you're not scrumming, if you're doing Kanban instead. Right? If you're doing Kanban, the product owner says, this ticket goes first. You still have the team coming in saying, I can't do that unless I do this one. But that's okay because that's a prerequisite that has to be met. But he's still going to do the next one that he or she wants.
But if we were doing Kanban, we would tie dependencies, and then we would take the dependency item and do it first, and then you'd be able to show I have to do item A and item B before I can finish C, and they're all basically part of the same trend or whatever.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So as a product owner, though, so to your point, as a product owner, you've got to be able to say, I've given the direction of these X number of items that I want done by the end of the time block. Within that time block, leave the team working on those as they see fit.
Yeah, this comes back to one of the first things we started with. I don't remember what topic we started with, but one of the first things we started with the daily Scrum. I do remember internet. which is like this is why it's kind of ridiculous for people to say I need to I need to know what like the specific work item people are working on in what order. It's like they don't know what item they're working on in what order until they start the work. That's the nature of knowledge work. You're not exactly sure how to get to you. You know what everybody knows what the destination is. They're not exactly sure what like listen, I know how to get to work. I know the location of where work is in the morning. Okay? But if there's a traffic jam and I do like I'm going to try to get around the traffic jam. So I might take a little different direction to work every morning. And like this is even like some people get in the car and they just run Google Maps automatically. Like when they get in the car, they don't even bother like knowing which way I'm going to take to get to work. They just plug it right in their phone. Well, your phone is constantly optimizing how to get to work.
Yes.
So it could give you it like it could send you on the highway one day, send you the back roads another day, send you this other way another day that seems a bit longer, but in actuality it's slower because there's no whatever, there's no traffic jams or whatever. So it's actually faster. Like that's the nature of development work. It's like they're gonna figure out how to get you there, okay? But you can't have another level second guessing like, oh well, it seems if you just get on the highway every day, that's the most direct method.
Yeah, I think that analogy applies to non-knowledge work as well. So let's say, go back to construction. You've empowered the team to build a wall. Now, you're not going to say, okay, guys, you're going to use the level first to mark out, the height or whatever of the wall. Now you're going to mix the foundation, the concrete, sacrete, whatever, lay that down, and you put the bricks down, and you use the back of a trowel to stamp it down, and then you put the next layer on. That's generally the idea. But the person building the wall knows what they're doing, and they look at it and they're, oh yeah, this is a little bit higher at this end now, so I'm going to pick up the trowel again and use it. Right. And you go, why did you do that? That's micromanagement right there.
It certainly is.
And that needs to be avoided like the plague.
We probably could do I probably should write a note to myself to have a whole segment about micromanagement because there are even developers who believe that you must micromanage your other developers in order to get a level of quality or a level of compliance. I don't know the phrase to do, but I know more than what I can count on a single hand of developers I've interacted with that have this mindset. Yep. You have to micromanage the developers that are working with you or for you, depending on your hierarchy. I don't get it.
I agree with you. I think that's a very good topic, for a podcast because we can go on for a while there. It's not just from a developer mindset. It can be anywhere.
It could be anywhere.
Yeah,
it could be anywhere. It's certainly project management as well. Easily suffers from this issue. And project management is probably the worst because of project management. Like the more you micromanage in project management, you don't actually have direct influence on the work being done. It's even worse. At least as a developer, you can come in and you can say, it's like if we're gonna go back to the metaphor of like somebody laying bricks. You know what I mean? Like you set the mortar, you lay the brick down, you kind of level it out, you set some mortar on the side and on the bottom, you lay the next brick down. At least it's somebody else who has the skill at laying bricks saying, oh, that doesn't look exactly spaced right. Oh, that doesn't look exactly level. Like at least they generally know what they're talking about. A project manager trying to say, oh, you're not turning in things fast enough. Oh, you're not, you're generating bugs at a too high level, a certain one. Like, you're not even in the same discipline.
Right.
So like that's not even I'm gonna have a difficult time, but like we should put that on our list of topics to talk about. But I'm gonna have a very difficult time talking about that. We probably should try to get a developer to have that discussion with of like why, like how do you feel when another developer questions the method in which you develop it? Number one. Number two, how do you feel when somebody who's not a developer comes in and questions the method in which you're developing, but like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's excellent. I think we should definitely plan on getting a developer on and tackle these subjects. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's going to be a fun discussion.
I mean, I think I already know what they're going to tell us. Like,
Well, yeah, depends on who you get.
yeah, I guess so. I guess so. But I mean, like somebody who's like at least on the same level, like in the same realm as me, like someone who's in like the 15 to 20 year experience band of their career. I mean, like you don't need somebody looking over your shoulder. Like you know what a good job and a bad job look like. Okay, so like like I don't.
But then you have a few like in that experience band that say, that's how they grew up, right? Through their professional career is by people micromanaging them. So they don't know any other way. That's how you do things.
Yeah.
And those are the people that are propagating that idea, right? The people have to report into me. And you'll often pick that up in hallway conversations. They'll say, I'm in charge of 50 people or whatever. It's like, or so many people report to me or whatever. It's like, yeah, you're kind of missing the point a bit here.
I can't I don't get it. Some of that stuff I just don't get.
I know. Today, especially. So, yeah, I think definitely just add it to our agenda. We'll pick that up with a developer. I think that'll be good. We maybe get two. One with not so much experience, one that is experienced. It'll be really good.
I think, I think that'd be a
maybe a millennials point of view.
It'd be a good topic. So that's sprint planning. I had one or two things I wanted to talk about inside that topic, but I'm willing to move on just for the purposes of the time. So, like, refinement is not a official event or whatever, but like I see refinement as there are two types of refinement that I do as a product owner, which is a normal scheduled refinement, and then I do an ad hoc refinement when I encounter topics that are like that either I normally do ad hoc refinements when I encounter a topic that I've not taken in for the first time or written any stories about at all, and I have a subject matter expert in the room, and I just need to like dig into a really narrow topic that the development team will be working on in the future. Maybe not directly in the next sprint, maybe like 2, 3, 4 sprints out. But I'll have a ad hoc requirement with that individual person just for the topic of talking about what we're going to talk about. But usually I will keep my normal refinement on the calendar. Like I said, I think I started this by talking about this topic. Mm-hmm. I like to do an hour per week, regardless sprint or not, an hour per week. And I have the development team in there with me, and I bring whatever subject matter experts I need into the room while I'm doing it. And I time box it in an hour, and I just get whatever I can get done in that hour, and whatever I can't, whatever, it gets pushed to the next session. And if I really encounter anything that really requires us to dig in at a super deep level, I will set up something special. Usually I set them up for an hour. Maybe I don't use that whole hour, but I'll usually set them up for an hour, mm-hmm. and it'll be just on one topic. So a normal refinement for me will cover however many topics I need, topics meaning stories that I need. But sometimes I'll do an ad hoc session just for one particular topic that's broad or whatever. Maybe I'll get several stories out of one topic or whatever. Like if we're exploring the idea of developing a new product, I'll bring in the people I need to one session that's dedicated just to that topic. Okay, so I have two ways that I do it. I have a normally scheduled business as usual, things in the backlog, refining them, getting them in front of the team, and hashing them out, and then I'll have a ad hoc as I need them deal. I could not have a regular scheduled thing, and just do them do them all ad hoc as I need them, and just try to pay attention to how much time overall from the team I'm using as I do it. I could do it all that way, but I find it's easier on the team to do it on a regular, recurring basis. It also kind of helps me as I do my refinements. It helps me kind of prepare. Like example here is I do all mine on Mondays, so it prepares me to know that I have to get all my business ready for Monday at that specific. It's after lunch, by the way. I have to get all my specific things ready Monday after lunch. I have to be ready for my team to come into the room to discuss these things. So, like scheduling versus ad hoc. Is there any other ways to do it? Or like, are those the two ways? Is there any other ways you suggest?
I think there's nuances to those approaches. Those are the most common ones, of course, right? And to your point, you do both.
Yeah.
Some product owners only do the scheduled.
Yeah.
And they say, let me know what needs to be talked about. I'm going to give you my hour, right? Every sprint.
I'm gonna be honest. If I did not have the business like throwing new things into my arena, if it was just like a regular cadence of things or whatever, I would prefer not to do the ad hoc. I would prefer just to do the schedule. But sometimes the business just is like, hey, stop everything you're doing. This is the top priority.
Right. Yeah, life happens. So yeah, exactly. But the nuances I talk about are, things like the product owner says we have something scheduled. We're open to doing things ad hoc. But you mentioned about new features or something like that. You bring in people to talk about. The opposite side of it I've seen as well, where something's already been discussed. The product owner's reviewed that with the team, and then the team has more questions. And so now it's narrow focus but deep, right? And the team is now asking these meaningful questions to elicit requirements, right, that the product owner didn't think about necessarily, because the product owner is looking at a macro level. This is what I need. Sure, yeah. And then the team says, well, in order to deliver that, we also have to do this, this, and this, right? And we have choices here, and we're not sure which choice is the right one or which choices are the right ones. Right. So bring the product owner in and say, what would the users really want here? There's three ways to do it. We could say, we'll save your information in whatever cookies or whatever and just let you log in, or we'll use SSO, or we'll use multi-factor authentication. What do you prefer? Right? That's an example of going deep. So coming back to your question though, I think the most ideal scenario would be to leave something on the calendar because it's there on people's calendar. But then populate the calendar ahead of time with those things that need to be discussed. And be ready to cancel if it's not worthwhile. The ad hoc absolutely is needed, because we're in the other segments of the podcast, we talked about opening up avenues of feedback and reducing the cycle. If you're doing that, expect that feedback to change your backlog. And so when that's happening, you need to communicate that with the team. So the ad hoc, I think, doesn't go away. I think there's a balance there, right? So if you're on a 2-week cadence and you're doing 2 hours, you're there. If you're also doing 2 hours plus half an hour of the ad hoc, just make sure it's not happening every week. It shouldn't be, right, in reality. But if it is, then you need to look at that, right, and say, why is that?
What like the Scrum Guide? The Scrum Guide does not. I don't think it does. I'm a bad Scrum Master right now. Does it prescribe an amount of time for refinement? I don't think it does.
The Scrum Guide doesn't include refinement at all. To my knowledge, I might have missed it, but the latest one I don't believe includes refinement. It's not part of Scrum. I think it's something you do if it works for you, right? So I know we're talking about Scrum, but if we were talking about Kanban, for instance, then there's the concept of replenishing the backlog that the product owner needs to do. But then the team, for its purpose, right, what they need to do is to break down every item such that it's roughly the same size, right? Because that's the only way. We're not looking at story points here in that model. So it's the only way you can say how many things you're getting over the finish line. That's your kind of performance metric. But you can only do that if they're all the same size. So that's hard for a team to do sometimes, right?
But even in Kanban, you can set up your trigger. I had a Kanban team that I was part of long time ago. Like when the to-do column on the Kanban team's board got below a certain amount of items, it would automatically trigger a planning session. So we would know once it got below whatever 2 items, whatever, I don't remember what it was. Once it got below a certain amount of items, it would automatically alert us that it was time to go back into like a backlog refinement, sprint plan. I don't know. It's a Kanban team, so it like doesn't really matter. But a planning session of some sort.
Hopefully, you shouldn't find yourself in that situation too often, because a product owner should be replenishing the backlog continuously.
Yeah.
With enough in there in the hopper.
Yeah.
But yeah. Those tools are awesome when they let you trigger those things.
Yeah. I mean, it was for that team. It was pretty easy because that team had been together for a long time. So it was pretty easy to have an alert for us to know. Oh, we need more items, basically, to go back to figure out more items. Yeah. I mean, the only other thing that we didn't cover is Well, we covered all of the general events. I mean, the only thing we didn't, and we even covered all of the normal events, and we also covered the refinement, which is not even an event.
Right. According to the Scrum Guide.
According to the Scrum Guide. I think you're wrong, Scrum Guide, but whatever. I'll
the Scrum Guide says it's an ongoing activity.
It's ongoing.
Take from that what you will, and I think that's on purpose, right?
Yeah, that was this is a contentious topic that we can't all agree on, so we'll just write a generality into the guide. Anyway, I'll write my angry tweets to the appropriate people in the meanwhile. But like to summarize, like we walked through. I don't even know the order we walked through, but we walked through the daily. We walked through the daily Scrum. We walked through retros, and we walked through the sprint planning and the sprint review and refinements.
In that sequence, though, you did well there.
I feel we hit each one of them well. We gave a few options for each. One or two options each, two or three options each.
1 to 3, whatever. Yeah.
Whatever.
But let us know in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube what you find valuable and how you do things that are different.
That is true. Yeah, if you have other methods that we didn't think of, because I'm very interested in things that we didn't think of. Also, Agile podcast questions at Gmail. Agile.podcast.questions@gmail. That's the email address for questions.
Send us topics that you're interested in.
I would like to talk about topics that people are interested in.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yikes. Well, that's enough for today.
That's enough for today. It's a wrap. Keep calm, stay safe, and keep your Agile on.
Or something.
Or something.